Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. We shall be looking forward in our subsequent bulletins, of course, like Herbert Kamoga said there, for reports on events as they are happening in Jinja at that expo. The Kickstarter discussion, we are going to be looking at the apparent cracks in what was described as the Holy Alliance, a coalition that came together with a key set of objectives at the beginning of the year. In the studio, I have with me eminent persons who will be offering us comment as well as analysis about the country's current political landscape. There's a lot that is happening, especially in light of the 2026 general election. There's a lot of posturing, but most importantly, taking of positions as different political players prepare for what is no doubt a big contest. The recent or the most recent happening within the political space is the arrest of retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye, his subsequent arraignment before court, and of course remand at Luzira prisons as he awaits for more charges against him. We ask, why is it that Kizza Besigye, a former protagonist on the political scene, could he be making a comeback inevitably? Those are all questions that our guests will help answer. And just to introduce them, I have with me Siraje Kifampa on my extreme left. He is the spokesperson for Jeema. Many thanks for joining us this morning. I have with me Ambassador Henry Mayega from the National Resistance Movement Party. Many thanks for joining us on Morning at NTV. It's always a pleasure to have you on board. Let me begin with Mr. Kifampa, especially in light of what was described as the Holy Alliance at the beginning of the year. It had a set of objectives. It also had its eyes firmly set on achieving something that appears to have run into the woods. If you don't mind, bring us up to speed with what the Holy Alliance was, or should I stick to is?
Thank you so much. Good morning, our viewers. I just want to give you a brief background about the Holy Alliance. There has been in the past so many coalitions. They always came to at the last moment when elections were just around the corner, and people were targeting elections. You know, the Inter-Party Coalition, we had the TDA, we had several. But because people came into those coalitions with the intention of being endorsed for presidential or whatever elected positions, they did not survive for so long. So whenever elections would end, then that was the end of those coalitions. Now, we came up with the Holy Alliance with the intention that we can have something that can be past elections, that cannot be looked at as a platform for people to vie for elective positions. Now, this alliance was on the premise that there was, by the time of its formation, there was the Homosexual Act bill, then eventually into an act. Now, one of the politicians who had been denied access to the UK, upon being granted permission to go to the UK, he was there and said that this bill had, rather this act had been brought to target him as an individual, and all those members of parliament that supported it were for the ruling government. So we said, as a country, we stand on a motto for God and my country. We have values that we cherish and we have to protect. So that's how the Holy Alliance came about, and we said that unlike the past alliances that we've had in the past, this alliance people should not come into it with the intention of being endorsed as being the candidates for the alliance and the like. So we invited the DP bloc, we invited the NEED, we invited the CP and the like. And we wrote what we call the transition agenda, where we said that we should look at President Museveni having a safe exit as a president, other than just going on TV and other platforms to castigate him and abuse him and do that, and with hope that will remove him from the presidency. We thought that President Museveni would listen to our views and provide for this country a future that cannot appear like the other autocracies that have lived for long in power, and when they left their countries into shatters. So we proposed for 3 years as the transition time. And all the members that are popping out today were part of this composition, and they contributed views to this transition agenda. Now, unfortunately, when elections drew nearer, the intentions they had in their hearts began coming up. The DP bloc said that they are coming up, they're fielding a candidate in the names of Honorable Mpuga in the 2026. They held a press conference at their newly established offices in Balintuma, that side of Rubaga. Then Mr. Kabuleta also thought that the whole alliance would endorse him as a presidential candidate in the 2026 elections, something we objected to, that we are not here to endorse candidates because we had learned a lesson from the past coalitions. So that's where the problems are coming from. However, the good thing is that the initiators of the idea are still together and intact. We hope that people will come back to the talking table and we dialogue over it.
I'm not surprised that the set of leaders who represent the parties or the entities that came together begin to walk out on account of not being the favored flag bearers, so to speak, or endorsed candidates. This is still unclear, especially with regard to the objective. And Ambassador Mayega, just allow me stay with Mr. Kifampa on this. The clarity of the objective itself. You spoke about the Anti-Homosexuality Act enactment at that point, being one of the drivers of this particular alliance coming together. To debunk what? The fact that another politician had claimed it's against him, so you came to educate that it wasn't actually against that one politician?
No, one, I wanted to clarify the issue of holy.
Holy.
That we cannot play politics alone without involving the spiritual part of it, because we are for God first, then our country. So I was just giving a background.
A background to it.
That when you say that people who passed the bill were targeting me and they are for the establishment, the regime, for the regime, that was something that we wanted to refute and say that as a country we have values that we cherish and will protect. Okay. But that was not the objective. Why? Because
it was a vehicle.
It was just the vehicle. And the objective was that we should have a smooth transition of power that Ugandans have yearned for years since independence and they've never seen. So we wrote what we call the transition agenda, where we called all the entities that you've mentioned. We sat down and drafted that agenda with each and every entity, political party or whatever formation, contributing their views to that agenda, which we agreed upon. Okay. And we said that we should give this to other stakeholders, look into it, then we present it to the parliament, then we engage the government in terms of a national dialogue where we shall present these views of seeing a Uganda having a smooth transfer of power from one president to another. That was the objective. And we are still chasing that objective. We've not given up on that objective. So here comes the challenge. And we made it very clear that please, the previous formations or whatever coalitions failed because they came with the sole intention of who endorses, they should endorse me for the presidents, for the member of parliament, for this position. And that's why you saw the TDA that had lasted for some time, when at the last moment Kanokiza Besigye stepped out of it. The Vice President Bukenya went back to the NRM and so many other things. Okay. We said we should learn from that. So we should begin forming a coalition that is not targeting the 2026 elections. And it should begin early enough so that we can go even past the elections. But because people are so used to elections, that's why I think.
All right. Ambassador Henry Mayega, forgive me for the amount of time that I've taken to try to understand the Holy Alliance. What's your take on how the explanation goes? Because it appears to me that the alliance faltered at the very first step on what it wanted to do, the how, and the vehicle that it chose at the moment. I'm trying to connect the objectives and the Anti-Homosexuality Act and then the holy aspect where politics must be apparently spiritual. What's your take on this?
Absolutely, because in my view, coalitions have got a history in this country. You got to start from 1962, the coalition of UPC and KY. And because the objectives right from the beginning were not very clear to the participants in that coalition, it became extremely difficult to realize the subsequent actions by the players in that coalition. And so that definitely applies to the 1979, when you had the UNLF here, with so many players, UPC, UPM in its formative stages, the DP, and quite a number of other people who didn't even have the thought of having the multi-party system in this country. They were there, like the Nabuderis and so on and so forth. They wanted this thing called Omugendo, the way we saw the NRM in 1986. And so the thing has been playing out in the subsequent times, and especially towards elections. 79, then we had the broad-based government in 1986. Then we had the Samogare-led coalition in 1996, 2001, led by Kizza Besigye. 2006, there was another. So the fundamental question here is, why have all these coalitions in this country failed? And yet in other countries, there is that tendency that actually coalitions work.
Yeah, sure.
Like in Germany, they do. But of course, sometimes they have issues where the big player probably superimposes itself.
Germany is a very advanced democracy, so to speak.
Absolutely. So I don't want to compare apples.
Please, let's use our regional name.
I agree. And of course, those democracies have been there for a very long time. And you can expect that actually coalitions can last a little longer than what we can have in this country. And so that really makes it extremely difficult in our situation where coalitions can work. And they have actually failed in this country, in my view. I've been in the opposition before, there's no doubt about it. My extraction was from the UPC before I joined the NRM in 2010. And I know I've tried quite a number of times. As I've said, 1996, 2001, 2006. And then 2010, everybody packed their bags and they got out of the old parties and they joined the NRM, including myself. The others left and joined the FDC and so on. The Cecily Ogwals let may her soul rest in eternal peace, and quite a number of things. So there is that real fundamental question as to why coalitions in this country can't work, because as he has rightly put it, there is that selfish level. It's me, it's all about me, and I don't want even to spare Kizza Besigye because his trajectory in terms of playing politics in this country has been extremely clear, because reform agenda, FDC, then two FDCs, now PFF. It means that somebody wants actually to be at the top all the time, and that really puts everybody at a level where they think that, look, it's not, we can't be part of that kind of arrangement because somebody wants to, superimpose himself or herself on others all the time, because it is either me, like they used to say in the French Revolution, it's the state is me and I'm the state.
I am the state.
Those were the kings. So it becomes extremely difficult. And of course the disunity itself, even amongst the players in these coalitions, creates an extra problem. I remember, and I will give you an example. When Kizza Besigye came, I don't want to go to 1996, may his soul rest in eternal peace, Paul Samogere. In 2001, Kizza Besigye was chosen by all the political groupings. But for us as youth wingers in the UPC, we said, no, we can't be part of that because we are a pattern, we must grow it. So if he must take us to another political arrangement, in that case, a coalition, let's first build the structures and become strong enough so that at the bargaining table, we can present what we think is right for this country. And that doesn't happen in a majority of cases for the coalitions that we had in this country. And it becomes extremely difficult. I'm not surprised that whatever coalition comes, it doesn't really reach that level of fruition where you see really the players coming to terms with what should be done, it's extremely difficult. It becomes extreme because of this disunity, no clear objectives. Of course, the objective is there, and in quotes, of course, and I don't want to be convinced about that, and that let's remove Museveni. Fine, you can go about that. Nobody should stop anybody from trying to remove anybody from power. That is the aspiration of every politician. It would become really the highest level of naivety if anybody took part in politics and they don't aspire to get into the leadership of the country. That's not what I aspire. I'm sure that's not what he aspires to have in this country of ours. But the fact of the matter, as far as I'm concerned, as we have seen from the histories, the objectives have not been very clear, and there is always that problem that let's focus on removing President Museveni. But have you built the structures right from the grassroots? Of course, there is always that argument that parties are not allowed to go to the ground, blah, 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 blah. But you must go there. That is the truth of the matter. And in politics, nobody is going to give you power from a silver plate. I have not seen it, not even in the US. You can see what has been happening to Trump. Court almost every day, court almost every day. And so, even in our current situation, because you see politics is very competitive, there is no doubt about it.
No doubt.
If I have it, I must outcompete you. Absolutely. So that's what I think has been the problem with coalition in this country, because I've been a player before. I've been inhabiting this country now for 60 years. And so I know exactly what has been happening in as far as coalitions are concerned.
Let's talk about what you describe as the apparent need by most political actors to be the ones at the front and not to allow any other person. The context is very clear for us here. To be able to dislodge, for example, the National Resistance Movement and President Yoweri Museveni for that matter, you have to be a formidable force yourself. And there is a deficit of leadership, for example, at party levels and systems, that you cannot readily identify an individual who has the drive, who has the ability to go for this contest. And that's where the whole thing comes into a bit of, running into each other. Every leader trying to say, it's my turn, this is me that can do this. It is a conversation you cannot deny. So when you say, for example, that the Holy Alliance got caught into that dilemma, it is something you cannot deny. There must be somebody you front. You must, if to use the word, for lack of a better word, you must manufacture that person. So when you come together, the conversation should always quickly be on who do we front, how do we beat the man.
Now, there is something that you're missing here. First of all, we are not saying that Uganda is short of leaders that can steer this country. That one, I think that is not even acceptable.
It's not acceptable, no.
But the only challenge we have is that we have a strong man seated in front there who has been there for 4 decades and who is willing to continue for more years without showing us that there is a plan for a transition which will be safe and smooth. Uganda has had a history of unstable transfer of power from one leader to another, where Ugandans have died, you understand? And the argument was, if we are to get a strong man or a leader who is going to steer this country, that is a bet for Ugandans. They will always vote for a president they feel that can steer this country. What we need to do is that we focus on having a smooth transition, and that's why we came up with a transition agenda. So the issues of elections will always come and go. You understand? And they've always been there. That's what the ambassador said, that the selfish interests of individuals in these coalitions have caused them to fail. Now, that is the issue that has come of late, where you saw people holding press conferences and saying that we pulled out of the whole alliance because they've gone back to the old rhetoric that failed other alliances or whatever coalitions. So for us, we're saying, let's first come up with an agenda which stipulates how a leader like President Museveni can be given a safe landing, where we talk of probably issues like his salary, issues like the security, issues of no retribution for whatever he did, immunity and all things that would persuade him to say, okay, for the good of this country, let's engage in this debate and see how we can have a safe transition You become the godfather of the country, and you give power to someone Ugandans have agreed upon to elect. But believe me not, every single candidate that goes into that election where President Museveni is on the ballot is very much aware that even before the vote is cast, President Museveni is the president, who is going to be declared the next president.
Mr. Kifampa, take us through your first meeting as the Holy Alliance and how you agreed on the design of this strategy. For example, you say ensuring that the president is assured of a salary and good life after office, assured of immunity from any trial because there are threats. For example, there are some people who have sought to take him to the International Criminal Court, and that is also something that... Did you have that conversation in your first meeting?
In fact...
And was that the point of disagreement?
No, let me say this. I will not go into the details of mentioning what the president was being offered, but because we have a transition bill in Parliament. Okay. It was proposed by one member of Parliament, I'm forgetting, from Buyikwe, Honorable Henry Mayega, and up to now it has not been debated, it has not been passed into an act, it has, even if it is passed, it has not been put into practice, it has not been tried. So we're saying that we can benchmark with other countries. How have they done it? How have they managed to have safe transitions? You understand? Those are details that were in the transition agenda. But what we said, that this coalition, this alliance, is not all about endorsing people to stand for elected positions like it has been in the past. I'm telling you, because of the selfish interests, and people are just looking at the elections, that's why we're having challenges today. But we had several meetings. We engaged everyone. And it was an open meeting where people came up with their views. We debated, discussed them, and we agreed. They all penned their signatures on that transition agenda. So I think we just need to go back and rethink as Ugandans. What do we need?
All right. We need so much. And I'm sure Ambassador Henry Mayega can offer us a look into the national resistance movement and where the conversation on transition is within the party. There is common belief, for example, that no one questions President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni's stance on standing again as a presidential candidate, and you are willing to allow him stay on until when maybe he says, I want to cede power and I want a transition to happen and I want a successor. What's the conversation like within the national resistance movement? I know you're not the spokesperson, but as an insider, has this debate been given the chance to flourish?
First of all, I just wanted to quickly respond to the prospect some people have in their minds, that or the presumption that you're going to have to give President Yoweri Museveni a soft landing so that then he decides now to leave the power.
Reassure him, so to speak.
The reassurance is written in the Constitution. It is, I mean, the way forward as far as handling transitions is very clear in the Constitution. Once elections are held and he loses the vote, then somebody who wins those votes, I mean, the election, takes over the reins of power in this country.
Let me state this clearly before you continue with the serious submission, that on several occasions, even the military has assured the country that they will not allow that constitutional provision to see the light of day. In other words, they would not allow anybody else.
Absolutely, because of course, every political party you have these extremists, and they will say those things, but that is not the official position of the NRM. I'm sure about that 100%. It's not the position of the NRM, officially and formally.
What's the conversation?
You'll always find extremists. I remember when the UPC was in government, there was a man who was called Henry, I forget the other name, but he came from Soga, he was in the army. Very, very chaotic young man, and very, very prolific in as far as his political activism was concerned. And Henry Namiti, my namesake. And he always made those verbal utterances which were extremists, but they were not the official position of the party. And that happens in all parties. In Israel, I will give you an example. There is a minister of, I think of, not of defense, but I think of heritage. And he's an extremist, he's a right wing. And he has been, for instance, of course, you know that there is now a peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon to cease fire. But this minister has been saying that that is a surrender. So there will always be those kinds of people who will say those things, including even in Yemen. They will say those things. But putting that one aside, the transition, as you say, your question, is extremely important to Uganda. And I don't believe that there is a problem as far as I'm concerned. The discussions, of course, every other time there have been internal elections in the NRM, there have been people who have wanted to contest. But you see, President Yoweri Museveni is a very powerful person. He's iconic. So if you are going to come out from the NRM and say you are contesting against him, you must be. But people have always tried to contest against President Yoweri Museveni, and they have always been even given nomination papers. That has happened. I'm not going to name names, but those who remember the histories of the NRM, most especially when he has been in the power, many people have come up to contest against President Yoweri for the leadership of the NRM, you know, and of course the rest is history, because this is a very powerful person. The personality is very powerful. He's iconic. He's that father figure and all this kind. He's the one who has restored peace, security, and stability in this country, and so it becomes extremely difficult. And you have seen those kinds of examples even in the rest of the countries, quite a number of them. So there is no blockage at all for anybody who wants to contest against President Yoweri Museveni. I'm sure there are going to be nomination processes within the NRM, and we'll see quite a number of people picking up nomination papers from the headquarters of the NRM. There's no doubt about that. But as to whether they're going to beat President Yoweri Museveni for that contestation, I doubt extremely. I don't think it's going to be possible, because he's still a powerful person and he's doing a good job, as far as I'm concerned. Of course, the opposition will say that this man is not doing a good job, but as far as I'm concerned, he's doing a good job, because he still steers the country, and that's why we've been enjoying peace for a very long time in this country.
Does that negate the debate for a post-Museveni Uganda, because President Museveni is doing well, he's steering the country well?
Of course, that is a debate which can't close.
Shouldn't you talk about it?
Yeah, people should talk about it. I mean, people should talk about it.
So
I am sure even within the NRM itself, there are people who are talking about it. The opposition, of course, has been very open about it. They're talking about the post-Museveni era. We can't shy away from that reality. It is very clear that, of course, President Yoweri Museveni is not going to be president of Uganda forever. There will come a time, but that has to follow the path of democratic elections, both within the party and also outside the party. So for me, that's how I look at these things. But if somebody is probably thinking in terms of, like I've seen of recent, is thinking in terms of using arms to remove a sitting government, I wish them the best. Otherwise, democracy for me is, as far as I'm concerned, is the answer. Look, we had a referendum in 2005, which allowed multiple. There was a time when we didn't, as parties, we're not allowed to have this, participation in the politics of this country, and there was only one political system in the country, which was the NRM, and by conscription, all of us fell into line. But right now, after especially the referendum of 2005, political parties, and I think I saw last week 14 of them which have registered. So that is, as far as I'm concerned, that's what should be the trajectory of the politics in this country, where democracy grows over time, and it's not a very long time, since 2005. The Americans, you didn't want me to give that example, have been having democracy for the last 250 years, but they're still grappling with problems.
Okay.
As far as the electoral processes are concerned.
I'm glad you talk about the Americans. The Americans have what has come to be a mainstream two-party system, the Democrats and the Republicans, but we know that there are other parties that play a role in the political system, including the Natural Law Party. We have a party that calls itself Constitution. But isn't it about time that maybe Africa or these other younger democracies agree on lessening the space for contestation so that we can have 2 or 3 ideologies, and within that setting is where every politician seeks to bring their idea and move on in the search for leadership? Is that something that is tenable? Because we seem to have too many parties, too many ideas that are different from each other, and we can't push through by ensuring that each one of us gets their way.
The issue is not having lesser political formations or more. You know, each country has got its own unique situation. And the people within that country must sit and think about their country with its peculiar and unique whatever circumstances they have.
Yeah.
When you talk about that transitions should always be, will always be there through the democratic means, I will agree. And in 1980 elections were there. What happened? The same president went to the bush because he was aggrieved with the results and the way how elections had been conducted. In other words, when someone talks about democracy and elections, people will give examples that elections have been there in Uganda. But we need to speak to our inner self and say that really, is this what we want? One, President Museveni is there. He has been there. These ones are saying that he should die in power because there is no plan within the NRM. There is no discussion. Someone can come here and talk a lot of English on TV that, you know, discussions have been there and people have stood against him. He cannot cite an example because he's a strong man who cannot be stood against. He's always a sole candidate in the NRM. One, that is a problem for the NRM because there is no space for growth. There is no space for offering leadership apart from himself. That for as long as he is still there, NRM will have no leaders that are coming up at the level of the president. Other levels, MPs will come and go, and other district persons and others. But I'm telling you, and the main office, the CEO of this country, is the main office. It's the one that brings peace or that destructs peace. So within the NRM, there's no that debate. There's no that discussion. Now we come at the national level, where all political players are there. The different political formations. Now, when we come and talk about this, I think this is something that even the NRM itself should embrace for the good of this country, where to have a peaceful transfer of power from one leader to another. Because since 1962, when we became independent, it has never happened in this country. So I think it's a debate that everyone should welcome and see how better can we have a post-Museveni debate in this country at this time, before President Museveni dies in power. Because in the past we've just seen his son had presidential ambitions and he made them very clear. Not until of late when he said that all my supporters should support President Museveni. Talking about overzealous people within talking about the overzealous people within the NRM or the army and the other whatever. You're the one who are governing this country. How do you hold those people accountable? That what the rhetoric you're making here, the messages that you're passing out can cause danger and problems for this country in the future. Because how can a serving officer say that we cannot allow a civilian to become a president of this country? It means that either the person who is going to become president is either going to be a soldier or a police officer, and you leave that person scot-free to move around and say that he's the CDF, is the CDF of the army. So I think that spells danger for this country. A discussion about President Museveni, a discussion about transition is a very important discussion that everyone should embrace and welcome and see how we can have a Uganda past President Museveni that is peaceful.
All right, thank you very much, Siraje Kifampa. Ambassador, your last word on the post-Museveni debate. We understand and we appreciate the fact that you believe that the president is very powerful. He's been, like you said, he has guaranteed the peace. That is not a stamp for staying in power for as long as he can. We need to understand that Uganda can be. Is that a conversation that can be started without necessarily saying there's a father figure, let us leave him do what he wants, lead us, direct us? Yeah.
Well, first, I just wanted to respond to my colleague's assertion that there is no transition, nobody, because Museveni is there. He's a very powerful person and nobody talks openly about these things, which we are discussing this morning.
We get if the country gets hoodwinked.
Absolutely. If the opposition
somebody is competing against him.
Absolutely. If the opposition have identified that one as a weakness of NRM, I think their job becomes much easier to get rid of President Henry Mayega because he's weak. He has stabbed himself as the eternal leader of this country and so on. So for me, that is a weakness in as far as the opposition is concerned. If they have identified that weakness, then I think their job is cut out. It's very simple because it has become very easier for them to uproot President Mayega through an electoral process. Not the other means. Of course, those means are not acceptable because they're outside the constitution. The opposition, in my view, have got three options. One is cohabitation. Yeah, there are some who are cohabiting with the NRM. Yeah, they can choose that. I mean, Mao is there, Betty Among is there, Betty is from UPC, Mao is from DP. Wow. You can cohabit. The other option is co-option. You accept the yes, for me I'm weaker, let me go and just surrender to the NRM. The other one is for them to keep trying to do these coalitions, and then we see where the political processes in this country are going to go. If I had time, I would allow Siraje Kifampa to respond to that, but I don't. But this conversation, no doubt, can continue behind the scenes. I will allow us to do a transition and go for a break. But MorningAtNTV does continue. When we return, we'll be talking about 16 days of activism as the world pays attention to a spectre that should be halted. Violence